Are you one of those people that likes to worm your alpacas or llamas all in one go? That is blanket worming. If you are, you need to listen to this. The biggest problem that you can cause in your herd by blanket worming is introducing resistant parasites into your population or increasing the speed of development of those resistant parasites. I understand why you want to do it, because it's quite easy just to get the same drug, treat all of the animals with the same thing, and then you think you've wormed everybody, you think you've dealt with the whole problem. But what's going to happen basically is you're just burying your head in the sand like an ostrich and pretending that there isn't a problem there that you're fixing, because you're not targeting anything particularly specific at those animals. I'm Claire Whitehead, and I'm a specialist veterinarian working with camelids. I've been working as a vet now for some 23 years, about 20 of those almost exclusively with camelids. I also run diagnostic testing service for primarily fecal testing for owners with alpacas and llamas, and I advise owners and vets on how best to look after their animals. So here are the biggest problems with blanket worming. First off, you're actually not really going to know what you're treating your animals for. So if you're taking one single wormer and giving it to the animals, hoping that it's going to hit something and stick, basically think again, because different parasites need to be treated differently. Different parasites have different susceptibilities to certain wormers. Some are resistant, for example, injectable ivermectin and doramectin, that's Ivomec and Dectomax, are virtually useless now in most of the UK and the US for sure, and probably the same is true across Europe as well. People have overused ivermectin and doramectin over the years for blanket worming, and thus we've ended up with an awful lot of parasite resistance. In the US, they've been used for meningeal worm prevention, so we've had the same situation develop over there as well. So basically we've ended up with an increase in the speed of development of resistance because of blanket worming. And the reason it's a problem is because if you treat everything in the herd, basically all you're leaving is the resistant parasites in the host. So then they're just going to replicate faster and pass those genes on to the entire population of parasites. Whereas if you leave some susceptible parasites still inside the animals by not treating everybody in the herd, you then end up with some resistant parasites that breed with the susceptible parasites, and it slows down the speed of passing on those resistant genes onto the next population. So you always want to aim to leave some animals untreated in the population. Now, the problem with using the same wormer all the time, regardless of what the wormer is, whether it's ivermectin injectable, whether it's Panicure, whether it's Cydectin, whether it's Zolvix, the problem with using the same wormer all the time is that you're not directing the wormer at the parasites that are actually there. The best part about doing fecal testing is that someone like myself can advise you what worm is likely to be effective. And then when we've treated them, we can come back with another sample and make sure that the wormer that we've used has been actually effective against what we've got in the animals. If you don't do that step and don't check that it's actually been effective, then you could be completely just burying your head in the sand about a resistance problem in the herd. So it's important to identify if there are problems, because then you can potentially avoid those wormers in the future. If you've got a really sick animal, you don't want to be using a resistant a wormer to which the parasites are resistant, because that's just going to mean the animal's going to die. And another problem with using these wormers and sort of assuming that it's hit something and that you haven't got a problem with the parasites in your herd is that before long something's going to creep up on you and you'll think that everything's everything's beautiful, all your animals are well, when in fact actually there's a parasite problem building in the herd. There's always going to be some individuals that are more susceptible to others, and all of a sudden you've got a dead animal out in the field. If you don't then do a post-mortem to investigate what actually happened in that individual case, then you could end up with a second animal that's dead in front of you. So it's important really to do fecal testing and to worm appropriately based on what is found. So if you keep llamas and alpacas, I would encourage you always to develop a holistic parasite control strategy with your vet. Try to use your vet in conjunction so that you're developing the best parasite control strategy and also using the most up-to-date tools at your disposal. But basically, you should always include all of the 5 following practices in your parasite control strategy. First of all is pasture management. So that includes things like making sure that your stocking densities aren't too high. For good quality pastures like we have here in the UK, we're looking at ideally maximum stocking densities of 5 animals per acre. You really don't want to go above that because you start to get an accumulation of parasites, and also it's hard to rest grazing and allow that grass to regrow as well. So stocking density is really important. You should always have spare pasture available in case you do have problems and you need to move animals, but also so that you can rest pasture and allow the grass to recover so that it's there and it's fully nutritious for your animals. Also in pasture management, we include poo removal from the pasture, so poovering we might call it here in the UK as well. So basically removing all of the fecal material from the pasture in the first place means that you're removing the eggs from the pasture before they even hatch into larvae to be consumed by your animals. So if you remove the feces from the pasture, and most parasite eggs will, well, certainly some of the faster hatching eggs will hatch out in 3 to 5 days. If you're removing your fecal material before that timing has happened, then you're effectively removing the problem. It's always best if you can to do poo removal frequently. If you can do it every day or 2, that's really going to be ideal. Don't worry if you go away for the weekend, because hopefully if you do from Friday to Monday, it shouldn't have accumulated too fast in that time. Secondly, we want to do monitoring. So this is going to include things like body condition scoring to check on the health of your animals, and also checking the mucous membrane color around the eyes, which has a check on anemia, which can be caused by certain types of parasite, like predominantly Haemonchus or the barber pole worm. So fecal testing also needs to come into this as well. So this is number 3, fecal testing, regular fecal testing at least twice a year. Anytime you have a sick animal, anytime you think you've got a problem, just submit feces for testing. It's the number 1 thing that you can do to rule out, at least, if you've got any sort of a sick animal. It's pretty easy and relatively cheap to do. So that's number 1, pasture management. Number 2, monitoring, body condition scoring and mucous membrane color checking. Number 3, fecal testing. Number 4 is use of wormers, that's anthelmintics, or anticoccidials, against what we find on the fecal. So you should be using what is appropriate to what is found on the fecal testing, and only using it where it's necessary. Okay, and there are different strategies depending on whether you've got small herd and you can test everybody, versus if you've got a larger herd and you do need to be more selective about how you choose who needs to be tested and who then gets treated. And finally, I want you to be very careful when you're bringing animals into your herd. You don't want animals that are going to bring parasites in, potentially if they're resistant parasites. So we like to have a quarantine protocol to make sure that they don't bring those parasites in the first place. But secondly, animals that are moved, alpacas and llamas are very susceptible to stress. So if we move them, they can be, if they're stressed, that can suppress their immune system. If their immune system is suppressed, they're more susceptible to parasites. So what you want to do is basically isolate them, quarantine them for a while. You want to be giving them a clean out worming before they come on board, and make sure that we're not introducing problems that are, or allowing them to continue with problems that become worse, a subclinical problem becoming a clinical problem when you move them onto your farm. If you'd like to learn more about parasite control strategies or Camelid herd health management in general, please do check out my course by following the link below, and do follow me here for more free great value.